to undermine natural religion. One is the idea that space and time are the organs of God, by which we perceive things in the world, and the other one that God has to intervene in different ways for various reasons in the world. But we think that that's a picture of God that actually starts to undermine natural religion. So let's see the intervention that he talks about. So, God has to intervene in order to prevent stars from falling on each other. That's something that Newton actually says in his book of optics, and also in a correspondence to Bentley. Richard Bentley was Cambridge academic, who became in 1700 Master of Printing College at Cambridge University. Newton was in Printing College. And Bentley delivered a series of lectures that is called the Boyle lecture. Still, every year in Cambridge there is the Boyle lecture. Who was Boyle? Anybody know? Pardon? Okay, yeah. He was a natural philosopher. Okay. And before publishing the lectures, that were called the Confutation of Atheism, it's very well. He checked with Newton whether his ideas were right, whether he made mistakes. He wasn't a natural philosopher, he wasn't like, Newton didn't know Newtonian mechanics, and whether it was in conformity with Newton's ideas. And this exchange between them actually you have to understand Newton's view. Because Newton's view in his book is not always as spelled out as in some correspondences. So in reply, Newton says, as you first worried, it seems to me that if matter of our sun and planets and all the matter in the universe was evenly scattered throughout all the heavens, and every particle has an innate gravity toward all the rest, so there is gravity, and the whole space throughout, which this matter was scattered, was but finite. So if we have finite space, and all the things in space attract each other according to gravity, the matter on the outside of this space would, by its gravity, tend toward the matter on the inside, and by consequence, fall down to the middle of the whole space, and there compose one great spherical mass. Basically, this is the picture. You have planets, like on the left-hand side, and the world is finite. Think about it as part of the block universe. Okay, it's a cube. Then everything would collapse to the middle. Why? You should know. Just by knowing a little bit of gravity, not even the mathematics. Yeah, and there is nothing that keeps them away. Okay? So there is a pressure, or there is force to go to the middle, but there is nothing that keeps them away. So Newton continues that if the matter was evenly diffused through an infinite space, it would never convene into one mass, but some of it convene into one mass and some into another, so as to make an infinite number of great masses scattered in great differences from one another. So first of all, we see here that Newton seems to suggest that the universe is infinite. So that's the picture. If the universe is infinite, there is always things that pull from the sides, because there is no end to them. And then we might get things that concentrate but they don't all concentrate to the same point. That's what Newton says. Okay? So far we haven't talked about the intervention of God, but now it's coming. And in reply to Bentley constraint that in such universe object will not move, Newton says, because if there is such a balance that all, are the same, like all, because of the gravity from all sides is the same, so they don't have any reason to move from one place to another, Newton says that, and much harder it is to suppose that all the particles in an infinite space should be accurately posed one among another as to stand still in a perfect equilibrium. For a record, this is as hard as to make not one needle only, but an infinite number of them, so many as there are particles in the infinite space, stand accurately posed upon their points. So first of all, it seems that he says that he seems to suggest that there should be some outside intervention in order even to keep all these standing, because it's very difficult to arrange exactly things that they will stand in such a way. So it might be not that any natural force can actually achieve that, or there is a suggestion that God is there. Yet I grant it possible, at least by divine power, and if there were once so placed, I agree with you. So Newton is saying basically that the arrangement of the matter in the universe is done by God and cannot be just explained by any law of nature. That there must be some intervention. And then talking about the movement, and he said, okay. And then he says that, and if there were once some place, I agree with you, that they would continue in that posture without motion forever. So that's what you mentioned. Unless put into a new motion by the same power. When therefore I said that matter evenly spread through all spaces would convene by its gravity into one or more great masses, I understand it of matter not resting in accurate force. So what Newton is saying that God also will arrange it so that things move in a certain way, not just to stay put. So that's a very special arrangement. And he adds, to your second query, I answer that the motion which the planet now have could not spring from any natural cause. So basically it says no law of nature can explain why things move the way they move alone, but were impressed by intelligent agent, of course. Who's the intelligent agent? It's plain that there is no natural cause which could determine on the planet, both primary and secondary, to move the same way and in the same plane without any considerable variation. This must have been the effect of constant. So technically it's kind of maybe difficult what exactly going on, but what is clear that God has to arrange these movements. No question about it. Newton is pretty clear here. That only God, that none of his laws, and maybe no of any laws that human, would come up with, would explain why there is such a motion in the universe. It requires the intervention of God. Nor is there any natural cause which could give the planet not just degree of velocity in proportion to the distances from the sun and other central body about which they move, and to the quantity of matter containing this body which were requisite to make them move in concentric orbs about these bodies. So basically what Newton says that it's the job of God to distribute at the beginning. The amount of matter and the position and the velocity of things. So, and only then the laws of nature can account for what's going on. cannot be just explanation that is natural. It must be God. So in other words, he says that if you want to know physics well, you have to understand that God distributes, created and distributed, all the objects in the world, and give them a certain velocity to start with, and relation and so on. And Newton says similar things again in another letter. Gravity may put the planet into motion, but without a divine power, it could never put them into such circulating motion as they have about the sun. Basically, here is more specific about our solar system. Just a second. That God has to arrange it. As they have about the sun, and therefore I'm compelled to ascribe the frame of this system to an intelligent agent. So suggesting that God conserve the frame of things and impress his divine will.
So I feel like a lot of the arguments that are made are just like nature versus God. I remember reading and Clark has that brilliant concept last year about saying that while we performing the nature, all that stuff, even nature itself is not really a concept, so there's a lot of nature that has to be God.
Yes.
So what's supernatural and natural is not really different to God, it's just that what we think is regular in nature and what is out of the regularity.
So the question here is like, well, God seems to be the kind of responsible for everything because he creates and then the laws and so on. So what is natural, what is supernatural? And, are they? Yeah. It's actually a very difficult question that I'm not able to answer what exactly. One can spend a lot of time thinking about all these issues. We are just touching, but I think that you can see how Newton is different from Leibniz. For Leibniz, God would come up with certain principles and create the world according to these principles and can learn them. So there won't be, this answer that, God put things in a certain way. God created according to principles. He has always sufficient reason. Sometimes it's difficult to understand, but in principle, if we had like a finite mind or something like that, we would understand why, the things are, and we can use the principle. But it seems that Newton is saying in so many words that no laws will explain ever why the universe is the way. You can use the principle of the mathematical principle of natural philosophy, which is Newtonian physics, in that sense, but it could also go that far to explain what's going on. So they differ in that sense. Okay. So that was about, how God arranged things, but God also has to intervene in order to prevent irregularity of motion of the planets. And again, Newton in the optics, talks about the irregularity which arises in the motion of the planet because of disturbing influence. We mentioned it before. And he suggests that these irregularities will increase the system, that will increase, until the system wants a reformation, and then God has to intervene from time to time to adjust the solar system so it will continue to be the way it is. Yeah.
Do you think that it would just perceive that God could just, like the Big Bang Theory still be found, but just God placed it?
I don't know. It's difficult to think about it because from Newton, God created the world, but the world is infinite. Like the Big Bang is finite. The world, the universe is supposed to be finite and stuff. So it's really difficult, I mean, to answer this question. Kind of in history of science, people don't like to answer this question. Because, you know, like, it's a bit anachronistic in that sense. But I suppose that, I mean, but the point is that, of course, I mean, that creates the world. So the question between them is not whether that creates the world. Leibniz and Newton agree on that. But the question is whether the creation was with all the laws and then you leave the universe to work for itself. And for Leibniz, the intervention in the universe is not in order to fix the planet. It's for grace, or something more complicated. I mean, but for Newton, it is like to continue, I mean, to actually get things, I mean, right. So for Leibniz, I mean, this kind of God, I mean, is like, surely God can do better. Especially if it's the best of possible world. Okay. And we said also that there is an intervention to maintain constant amount of motion in the universe. So that's again, we mentioned it, because Newton says that this is apparently necessary because by reason of the tendency of fluids and the weakness of elasticity in solid motion. Motion is such more apt to be lost, and always upon the decay. So basically friction, because we have friction and we don't have always elastic collision. You know, elastic collision, what happens in elastic collision? Yeah, energy is conserved. Okay, so they don't quote in the words, I mean, talking about conservation of energy is a bit anachronistic, but their language, I mean, suggests or refer or anticipate something like conservation of energy. So it seems like that what Newton is worried about, that if God would not intervene, the universe will perish at some point because, I mean, the energy will lose energy. Okay. Question so far. So we see so far, we talked about why Newton thinks that he needs to postulate the constant intervention of God even after the creation. So God created the universe, but then intervened. And the Leibniz think that basically plays into the materialist in the sense that that it portrays God not in a very positive way, a super intelligent being. And the other thing was that we talked about was that Leibniz complained that Newton think about space and time as the organs of God, which means that in some sense the things in the world are somewhat independent of God. Which is not the view that theists like them, I mean people who are religious like them, should have. So let's see, now in reaction to the intervention of God in the world, Leibniz actually poses in the second letter a dilemma for Newton. It's not, it doesn't say here is the dilemma, but basically if you were to construct the text and analyze it, it's a kind of dilemma. He said the first form of the dilemma, he said if God is obliged to make the course of nature from time to time, it must be done either supernaturally or naturally. No? There's only two options. Either God does it in a natural way, via the laws of nature, or he does it by supernatural intervention, which kind of miracles. At least it's not natural. So the first form of the dilemma is if it be done supernaturally, we must have recourse to miracle in order to explain natural things, which is reducing an hypothesis ad absurdum. It's like to make this argument ad absurdum. For everything may easily be accounted for miracles. So basically, what Leibniz is saying here, look, miracle is too easy. You know, you don't have explanation, you said there was a miracle. You don't have an explanation for the law. You say God. So it's basically it would take, natural philosophy, reduce it ad absurdum. It's not something that you should do. So it would basically make the principle of reason void. If God, create the world according to the principle of reason, and then, you cannot use them because there is a miracle, and basically it's like end of discussion. God made a miracle, end of discussion, we cannot analyze it, and that's basically, contradicting the idea of natural theology, that human being can understand the creation of God. The whole idea of natural theology is that God created the universe in a way that we can understand it. And therefore, the engagement is trying to learn the world, to learn basically God's workmanship. Okay? But if it's just miracle and miracle just say that's the way it is, guys, that's all. Ladies and gentlemen, there is a miracle again. That's like listening that's not very good. The second one is that but if it is done naturally, then God will not be intelligenta supermanda. He will be comprehended under the nature of thing. That is, he will be the soul of the universe. That means that basically God will become like kind of object, or at least in some sense an object, rather than be super intelligent outside the world. So basically, the dilemma is either your science or physics sucks, or you make God, something that goes in the way, in the direction of the materialist. At least those who said that maybe God is an object, or matter, or material, or at least in some sense. Or at least is not as great as both of them think that God is. Is it clear what I like? Okay, so let's see Clark's reply. Both of them, Newton and Leibniz, were clever people. Okay, so the first is materialism and mathematical principle of natural philosophy. So remember, Leibniz seems to suggest that the mathematical principle of natural philosophy, meaning mathematical physics of Newton, contribute to the view that the materialist plays into the materialist philosophy. And Clark obviously doesn't want to admit that. So he agreed that there is a problem. He agreed that there is a problem, and that there is a decay. He just adds that it's not only in England, in other countries. Maybe that's kind of sticking like this. But then he thinks that the main reason is the false materialist philosophy, to which mathematical principles of natural philosophy, like physics, Newton's physics, are the most repugnant. These principles are also the enemies of those who hold the souls or even God himself are corporal. So basically, he agrees that there is a decay, but he disagrees that Newton's physics contribute to it. We will get back to that. We will get back, to this discussion again. Where we see some of the arguments that Leibniz has, more specific, why Newton's physics, and that's related to matter and the vacuum. Why Leibniz thinks that Newtonian physics actually plays into the materialist philosophy. As for the perception of God, also, I mean, Clark thinks that Leibniz's accusations are not correct, and basically he says that he says that Newton never said that space is the organ by which God makes use to perceive things, or God has need of any medium to perceive things. So he just denied, flatly denied the accusation. That's what he says. So Isaac Newton could not say that space is the organ which God makes use of to perceive things by, nor that he has need for any medium at all whereby to perceive things. But on the contrary, that he, being omnipresent, perceives all things by his immediate presence to them in all space, wherever they are, without the intervention or assistance of any organ or medium whatsoever. So basically, God is presented everywhere, and just by his presence, without any organs, he perceives everything. That's according to God, represented here. So first, denial that there is an organ, and explaining how God without organs can perceive everything. Because God is presented everywhere, is everywhere. That's a common view, religious view. And just by being present, God can perceive these things. But here it's not clear that actually Clark is saying the truth. It's not clear that Newton did not say what he said. And here's an interesting story, story, that is also can tell us something about science. Newton's optics was translated to Latin in 1706. And sometimes after the completion of the printing and before the binding, Newton and Clark decided to delete the formal identification